Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Jai.
ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai.
Jai.
Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.
Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham ki jai.
Jai.
Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki jai.
Jai.
Ganga Mai ki jai.
Jai.
Jamuna Mai ki jai.
Jai.
Tulsi Devi ki jai.
Jai.
Bhakti Devi ki jai.
Jai.
Shumaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Prem Anande.
Hari Hari Bol.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutade Srimate Bhaktivedanta Shami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
We're reading and discussing Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 10, the branches of the Chaitanya tree. And here we are at text number 22. And I see that Mother Kavita is not here. Do we have a volunteer for chanting the Bengali? Anyone?
Mother Sutapa is not here either.
Okay. So I can try. Pritye korite chahe prabhura lalana palana vairagya loka bhaye prabhu na mane kakhana. Jagadananda Pandit, as an incarnation of Satyabhama, always wanted to see the comfort of Lord Chaitanya. But since the Lord was a sannyasi, he did not accept the luxuries that Jagadananda Pandit offered. Dvi jane kakmarti lagaya kondala tar prityer katha age kohiba shakala. They sometimes appeared to fight over trifles, but these quarrels were based on their affection, of which I will speak later. So who were we just talking about? They were quarreling, and it was the incarnation of Satyabhama. Who was that?
Jagadananda Pandit.
Yes, Jagadananda Pandit. And what are the branches that we've already discussed? Does anybody remember?
The four brothers.
Who, four brothers? What brothers? What brothers of who?
Srivas Pandit,
Okay.
Sri Ram
Okay.
Pandit,
Ramanandra.
Sripati and Srinidhi,
Okay.
and
What other branches have we have?
Acharya Ratna,
That's right. Then,
Gadadhar Pandit,
okay.
Jagdananda Pandit, and
Yeah.
Vakreshwara Pandit.
Yes. And Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Okay.
Yes, Pundarik Vidya.
Right. Okay, here we have. It's interesting that Gadadhar Pandit and Pundarik Vidyanidhi they're described as separate branches, although Gadadhar Pandit was the spiritual master, was Pundarik Vidyanidhi. So here we have Raghava Pandit, Prabhur Adya Anuchar, Har Eka Shakha Mukhya, Makara Dvaja Kar. Raghava Pandit, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's original follower, is understood to have been the seventh. Does that say seventh? The seventh branch, yes. From him proceeded another sub-branch headed by Makaradvaj Khara. Purport. Khara, Khar, was the surname of Makaradvaj. At present, this surname is generally found in the Kayashta community. The Gauda Gunodesh Deepika 166 states, Dhanishta Bhaksha Shamagrim Krishnayadad Brajemitam Shaiva Shampratam Gauranga Priyo Raghava Pandita. Raghava Pandit was formerly a confidential gopi in Vraj during the time of Lord Krishna's pastimes. And his former name was Dhanishta. This gopi, Dhanishta, always engaged in preparing foods for Krishna. I don't know what it says there. It says Raghava Pandit was the original follower. Can you go back? Yeah. It says the original Adya follower. So I don't have any information about that. I wonder if any of you might. Didn't find anything about that. Anyone? Okay, we'll have to do some research about that then. Okay. In the scriptures. Next verse then, sorry. Kahar Bhagini Damayanti Prabhur Priyadasi Prabhur Bhoga Samagri J Kore Bar Mashi. Raghava Pandit's sister Damayanti was the dear maidservant of the Lord. She always collected various ingredients with which to cook for Lord Chaitanya. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhashya in the Gauda Gunadesh Deepika 167, it is mentioned Gunamala Braje Jashid Damayanti tu Tatsvasha. The gopi named Gunamala appeared as Raghava Pandit's sister Damayanti. On the East Bengal Railway line, beginning from the Shieldah station in Calcutta, there's a station named Shodapur, which is not very far from Calcutta. Within 1 mile of the station, toward the western side of the Ganges, is a village known as Parnihati, in which the residential quarters of Raghava Pandit still exist. On Raghava Pandit's tomb is a creeper on a concrete platform. There is also a Madan Mohan deity in a broken down temple nearby. This temple is managed by a local zamindar by the name Sri Shiva Chandra Rai Chowdhury. Makara Dvaja Khara was also an inhabitant of Panihati. Next verse. She Shab Shamagri Jata Jhalite Bhariya Raghava Loya Jana Gupata Koriya. The foods Damayanti cooked for Lord Chaitanya when he was at Puri were carried in bags by her brother, Raghava Pandit, without the knowledge of others. Barmash Taha Prabhu Korena Angikar Raghavera Jhali Boli Prasiddhi Jahar. The Lord accepted these foods throughout the entire year. These bags are still celebrated as Raghavera Jhali, the bags of Raghava Pandit. She Shab Shamagri Age Koriba Bishtar Jahar Shrobane Bhakter Bohe Ashrudhar. I shall describe the contents of the bags of Raghava Pandit later in this book. Hearing this narration, devotees generally cry and tears glide down from their eyes. Purport. A vivid description of these Raghavera Jhali is to be found in chapter 10 of the Antya Lila portion of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. Any questions so far, the last several verses? No questions? I was wondering what those bags of Raghavera Jali, two things was they were given so no one else knew, and I wondered why that was. The bags were sent to Lord Chaitanya brought by Raghava Pandit, but no one else knew about it. I didn't know. Perhaps people might try to take some before. Oh, I doubt that though. Anyway, and then the other thing is that just by hearing and this description of these bags of the offerings to Lord Chaitanya, people would cry. So they must be overflooded with Krishna prema. Of course, in our condition, it probably wouldn't happen because our hearts are a little still hard. But those people who have advanced in Krishna consciousness, perhaps they they have that reaction. Okay. Next verse. No, we did this verse. Prabhur Atyanta Priya Pandit Gangadas Jahar Smorane Foy Sarva Bandanash. Pandit Gangadas was the 8th dear branch of the tree of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One who remembers his activities attains freedom from all bondage. One who remembers his activities attains freedom from all bondage. Okay. Next. Chaitanya Parshada Sri Acharya Purandara Pita Kori Jare Bole Goranga Shundara. Sri Acharya Purandara, the 9th branch, was a constant associate of Lord Chaitanya's. The Lord accepted him as his father. Purport. It is described in the Caitanya Bhagavat that whenever Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited the house of Raghava Pandit, he also visited Purandara Acharya immediately upon receiving an invitation. Purandara Acharya is to be considered most fortunate because the Lord used to greet him by addressing him as Father and embracing him in great love. Damodar Pandit Shaka Premete Prachanga Prabhura Upare Jeho Koila Bakya Danda. Translation: Damodar Pandit, the 10th branch of the Caitanya tree, was so elevated in love of Lord Chaitanya that he once unhesitatingly chastised the Lord with strong words. Danda Katha Kohibe Age Bishtar Korea Dande Tushta Prabhu Tare Pataila Nadia. Later, in the Caitanya Caritamrita, I shall describe this incident of chastisement in detail. The Lord, being very much satisfied by this chastisement, sent Damodar Pandit to Navadip. Purport. Damodar Pandit, who was formerly known as Shaibya in Vrajdam, used to carry messages from Lord Chaitanya to Sachimata. And during the Ratayatra festival, he carried messages from Sachimata to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militang Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitang Jena Bhutale Shayam Rupa Gadabhayam Dadati Shapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashari Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'd like to seek the permission and blessings of the devotees, especially those who are senior by age, advancement in Krishna consciousness, or involvement in the Hare Krishna movement. We're talking about the different branches of the Caitanya tree. And now this, the 10th branch here is Damodar Pandit, a branch of Lord Chaitanya's tree. And Damodar Pandit, at one time, it said here, he chastised, he chastised Lord Chaitanya. So exactly what that chastisement was, I thought we could read it briefly here. What happened was that there was this is while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Puri, and there was a Brahmani whose husband had passed away. She was still young and very beautiful, and she had a son, and he was also quite attractive, who used to come to see Lord Chaitanya regularly. So Damodar Pandit took exception to that, and we'll read it here. This is from the Antya Leela, chapter 3, text number 3. In Jagannath Puri, there was a young boy who had been born of an Orishan Brahmin, but had later lost his father. The boy's features were very beautiful, and his behavior was extremely gentle. The boy came daily to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and offered him respectful obeisances. He was free to talk with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because the Lord was his life and soul. But the boy's intimacy with the Lord and the Lord's mercy towards him were intolerable to Damodar Pandit. Okay, here we go. Damodar Pandit again and again forbade the son of the Brahmin to visit the Lord. But the boy could not bear staying home and not seeing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So even there you've got a sannyasi, Damodar Pandit, very strict sannyasi, saying, don't come. The boy still went. Usually you have to follow the directions of a sannyasi, but in this case, the boy didn't. One day, the boy came every day to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who treated him with great affection. It is the nature of any boy to go see a man who loves him. This was intolerable for Damodar Pandit. He became greatly unhappy, but there was nothing he could say, for the boy would ignore his restrictions. One day when the boy came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord very affectionately inquired from him about all kinds of news. After some time, when the boy stood up and left, the intolerant Damodar Pandit began to speak. Damodar Pandit impudently said to the Lord, everyone says that you are a great teacher because of your instructions to others. But now we shall find out what kind of teacher you are. You are known as Goshani, teacher or Acharya. But now talk about your attributes and reputation will spread throughout the city of Purushottam, how your position will be impaired. Although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew that Damodar Pandit was a pure and simple devotee, upon hearing this impudent talk, the Lord said, my dear Damodar, what nonsense are you speaking? My dear Lord, you can act as you please. No one can say anything to restrict you. Nevertheless, the entire world is impudent. People can say anything. How can you stop them? Dear Lord, you are a learned teacher. Why don't you then consider that this boy is the son of a widowed Brahmini? Why are you so affectionate to him? Although the boy's mother is completely austere and chaste, she has one natural fault. She is very beautiful, young girl. And you, my dear Lord, are a handsome, attractive young man. Therefore, certainly people will whisper about you. Why should you give them such an opportunity? Having said this, Damodar Pandit became silent. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiled, pleased within himself, and considered the impudence of Damodar Pandit. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu thought, this impudence is also a sign of pure love for me. I have no other intimate friend like Damodar Pandit. Thinking in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to perform his noon duties. The next day he called Damodar Pandit to a solitary place. The Lord said, my dear friend Damodar, you had better go to Nadia and stay with my mother. I see no one but you can protect her, for you are so careful that you caution even me. You are the most neutral among my associates. This is very good, for without being neutral, one cannot protect religious principles. Well, let's go back to text number 11. I'll read the purport there. Text number 11. Yeah. Everyone says you're a great teacher because of your instructions to others, but now we shall find what kind of teacher you are. Find out. Damodar Pandit was a great devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sometimes, however, a person in such a position becomes impudent, being influenced by the external energy and material considerations. Thus, a devotee mistakenly dares to criticize the activities of the spiritual master or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, despite the logic that Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. A devotee should not be disturbed by the activities of his spiritual master and should not try to criticize him. A devotee should be fixed in the conclusion that the spiritual master cannot be subject to criticism and should never be considered equal to a common man. Even if there appears to be some discrepancy according to an imperfect devotee's estimation, the devotee should be fixed in the conviction that even if his spiritual master goes to a liquor shop, he is not a drunkard. Rather, he must have some purpose in going there. It is said in a Bengali poem, Jajjapi Nityananda Shura Badi Joy, Tathapyo Hoy Nityananda Rai. Even if I see that Lord Nityananda has entered a liquor shop, I shall not be diverted from my conclusion that Nityananda Rai is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I'd like to hear from you. So what is Damodar Pandit? Why is he impudently, as it's mentioned here, impudently finding fault with Lord Chaitanya?
Actually, Prabhu, he was probably not finding the fault, but he was just like warning him, that what the people will say, just about the reputation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Actually, that was more important for him because people will gossip different things, And he knew that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord, so he will not do anything against scriptures or anything. All the scriptures, all the knowledge comes from Krishna anyway, who is in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he knew his real position, but he just warned against the social things that people will gossip different things about him, that he may be attached to this or that. So that
yes, good. And so he's worried about what would they say about him?
That he may have some affair with his mother, or he may be attracted to her, or something like that.
Yeah, with this widowed Brahmani.
Right.
He's showing affection to her son, so there's some connection going on. So people
all the time gossip different things.
Gossip, yes.
So that is the problem.
Yeah, that's what he said. People are very impudent. Not only me, but people are very impudent. And we see that did happen with Lord Ramchandra, wasn't it? That people gossiped that, Sita Devi was stayed for a year in the house in the care of Ravana. So is she really a chaste lady? And this kind of thing. So, so certainly there's a scope for that kind of thought. Srila Prabhupada says, although it does say that Lord Chaitanya took it as an expression of love, Srila Prabhupada says that devotees don't very much appreciate Damodar Pandit's criticism of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And here in that purport that we read, Srila Prabhupada talks about criticizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead or criticizing the spiritual master. So there are many examples of those things, and usually those of us with the material kind of conceptions, things come up in our mind about maybe the spiritual master did something wrong, or maybe Krishna did something wrong, and those are offenses and impediments in progressing in Krishna consciousness. So, for example, when Srila Prabhupada was trying to arrange for the purchase of the land in Juhu, there were so many obstacles that were in his path, and the person who was trying to sell the land to ISKCON was trying to cheat the devotees. And at one point, even though Srila Prabhupada had given specific instructions not to mess with the contract that had been agreed upon. So several devotees, or at least two or three, they thought, oh, Srila Prabhupada is just being stubborn and attached to this particular land, and it's too much trouble. And so they decided, you know what they decided to do?
No, Prabhu.
They
Cancel the contract.
cancel.
Yeah, they canceled the contract against Srila Prabhupada's specific instructions because they thought they knew better. And Srila Prabhupada then very strongly he acted and rectified the situation, but he also strongly chastised them. Another famous incident is Srila Prabhupada wrote the book Easy Journey to Other Planets. I think in 1959 he wrote the book, but later it was published in the United States after he came to the America. And the editor of the book changed a few things. So one time devotees were reading that in Srila Prabhupada's presence, and it came to a point where Prabhupada had written that they didn't go to the moon, but that the editor had taken it out. So thinking, oh, this was after the supposed apparent moon landing of 69. So thinking that Srila Prabhupada had made a mistake there, and now that they had actually landed on the moon, you have to take that off. Well, Srila Prabhupada said, no, put it back, because people will know that I was the first one that said, no, they didn't actually go. So that was how many years ago? 50 some years ago. And what's the benefit of that? What really benefit has come from supposedly going to the moon? But Srila Prabhupada said no. These kinds of things. So one should be very, very, very cautious if one thinks that the spiritual master has made some mistake. Usually what is the problem is that we've made some mistake, or we haven't fully understood what has gone on. Another good example that I recall is when we were reading the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita some years back. We came to a part where Srila Prabhupada was in Philadelphia in 1975. And I don't know, Kaivalya Prabhu, maybe you were even there at this time. I came to Philadelphia, but I wasn't. This was prior to the Rath Yatra ceremony, or perhaps the next day. Srila Prabhupada was having darshan, and Ravinda Swarup Prabhu, who was the temple president at the time, brought a professor from Temple University, who was a professor of religion. Were you there?
I don't recall, but I was there in the temple and I was there in Rath Yatra, but I actually do not recall, because there was a lot of rush in the temple, and I probably may not know the professor, that he's professor or something, because so many people are visiting him and doing his darshan. So it was hard for me, to recognize the professor.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so this professor was introduced to Srila Prabhupada. In the Lilamrita, his name is given as a Dr. Patel, but actually they changed this name to because they didn't want to embarrass him. But his actual name was Dr. Jadava. Jadava means from the family of Lord Krishna. Anyway, he was introduced, and there were some students there. So he was introduced to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, so what is your professor? What do you teach?" And he said, "I teach religion." And so Srila Prabhupada asked him, "So tell me, what is your understanding of religion?" And he said, "Well, no, I can't do that. You should probably tell me what you did," something like that, he said. And Srila Prabhupada said, "What is this? A professor of religion who cannot explain religion? What is this?" And he turned to Swarup Damodar, the scientist, and he said, "What is this?" And Swarup Damodar then said, in the presence of everyone. This is a cheater, Srila Prabhupada. Oh, this is a cheater. So there was some heated exchange back and forth after that. So different people have different, there's, the memory books, and different people have different takes on what happened. But anyway, there was not a pleasant exchange after that. And finally, the professor left. They got some prasadam, I think. But anyway, so one of the new devotees there at the time was hearing this exchange, and he said, what is this? The basic point of Vedic culture is you have to welcome and give proper care to your guests. So how is it that this is happening? So in other words, he was finding some fault with Srila Prabhupada. You follow?
Mhm.
Yeah. So anyway, I said, well, this is just one small part of this story, and the person who was there is Ravinda Swarup Prabhu. Why don't you just call him up? And I bet there's more to the story. I bet there's more to the story than what you've there's just there in the Lilamrita.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he did. He called him up. He called up Ravinda Swarup and he said, could you tell me any more about this? He said, yeah. He said, the next day, Ravinda Swarup said he went on the morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. And when he got in the car, he apologized to Srila Prabhupada. He said, I'm sorry about that man I brought. I didn't know he was such a rascal. And Prabhupada said, no, he laughed. He said, no, it's my business to chastise those people. Chastise the impersonalists. He said something like that. So he laughed. But he said, then Ravinda Swarup said, later he met that same man somehow walking near the campus of temple or something. And that man said to him, he asked him, how is your Guru Maharaj? And Ravinda Swarup was a little bit surprised because he seemed to be respectful. And he said, at that time he had already passed away. Srila Prabhupada had left. So he said, but then the man said, your Guru Maharaj, by his strong words, saved me. Because at the time when I came to see him, even though I was born in the family of Lord Krishna, I was involved in all kinds of sinful activities, eating meat, drunkenness, etc., etc. But his strong words shook me so that I could really come back to the right path. Very surprising, huh? So apparently, from one point of view, the material or standard point of view, Srila Prabhupada mistakenly wasn't cordial with his guest, but he had a higher purpose in his dealing with this particular individual that helped him progress on his spiritual path, which is the real purpose of life. Vaideshya Saravaira Hangeva Vedyo. The whole purpose of all these Vedic recommendations and strictures is to come to understand Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada helped him do that, even though from one point of view, he might have looked like there was some mistake in his behavior. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah. So of course, this is for Krishna and for the elevated devotees, spiritual master. One should be very careful. And in this case, Srila his Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then sent Damodar Pandit to Navadvip. That's very interesting, isn't it? It's not like, but he's doing it as a reward, not as a punishment. Do you follow?
Yeah.
So at another time, there was another devotee, Kala Krishnadas, who was traveling with Lord Chaitanya in South India. And even though he was in the constant association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he became allured by the Baraharis, which are gypsies. They had some women who dressed very provocatively, and so he became attracted to go with them, even though he is in this as a servant of Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya went there and asked for them and grabbed his hair and pulled him out. And the Baraharis attacked him and but their limbs were cut off by their offenses. Anyway, but afterwards, this Kala Krishnadas, when Mahaprabhu came back to Puri, he said he didn't want to deal with them anymore. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
So Kala Krishnadas was devastated. He was a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, but he had deviated in that way. So he said, Lord Chaitanya said, I can't trust him. So the devotees of the Lord, though, were so more merciful. Lord Nityananda and the other devotees, they say, well, let this Kala Krishnadas go to inform Mother Sachi that Lord Chaitanya has returned from his tour of South India and that she can come, that she should send his her blessings and to know that he's back. So he got the mercy of the devotees to serve the devotees in that way. But here, Damodar Pandit, who was impudently chastising Lord Chaitanya, and Srila Prabhupada says there in the purport, as a result of material energy, it says there, as a result of material energy. It becomes impudent. Sometimes, however, a person in a position, a great devotee, becomes impudent, being influenced by the external energy and material considerations. So it's important for us to guard against that influence, to unnecessarily criticize Krishna and his and the spiritual master, his great devotees, like that. Comments, questions, additions?
The Archana Bhakti had her hand up for a second.
Okay, I didn't notice that.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Prabhuji. I was just trying to get a clarification about Dr. Patel. So
Yes.
is this the same person that we hear in the morning walks on Juhu Beach that is always talk, and he comes to see Srila Prabhupada and, he becomes upset again and again that, the devotees sent him back, that Prabhupada is taking rest. It's the same person you're talking about?
No, different.
Oh, okay.
That Dr. Patel. This was a doctor. His name wasn't actually Dr. Patel. He was given a pseudonym for the Lilamrita because I guess they didn't want to, because he could be seen, his interaction with Srila Prabhupada could be seen in a negative light. So they changed his name. His actual name was Dr. Jadav.
The one that you're talking about.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, the one in Bombay, Dr. Pell, it's another.
That's
Yeah.
another. Okay.
It's another good example of sometimes he found fault with Srila Prabhupada's thing. Even also Lord Chaitanya, when Lord Chaitanya was traveling in South India, sometimes he would go into the temple of demigods. And in South India, there are many Vaishnavas, especially the Sri Vaishnavas. They were surprised. What is he doing going in the temples of demigods? They were surprised. They thought, what's going on? Because in the Shastras, if you read in especially the Kshatriya Dipika, there are many quotes from the Vedas, Brahma Yamala and others, would say that if by taking the prasadam of demigods, it's like eating meat, and those who are devotees of Vishnu, if they worship demigods, they immediately fall down. So they were surprised, very surprised. I once met a Sri Vaishnav sannyasi, and we were talking. He was a scholar, so he said we were talking. There are many similarities, of course, between Sri Vaishnav and Gaudiya Vaishnava. But he said there's one important difference between Sri Vaishnava and Gaudiya Vaishnava. I said, oh yeah, what is that? So he said, well, in Gaudiya Vaishnava, sometimes it's allowed to worship the demigods. But in Sri Vaishnava, not allowed, ever. Not allowed. This is what he said, anyway. So I said, how is that? How is that? How is that? And he said, well, as I say, he was a scholar. The gopis, in order to get Krishna as their husband, worship goddess Katyayani. So that was allowed. That was allowed. Whereas in Sri Vaishnava, they don't allow anything. So Lord Chaitanya, they were thinking, oh, he's going into the demigod temple. But if you see in Caitanya Caritamrita, Lord Chaitanya, he went sometimes into the temple of, say, Lakshmi at Madurai. But what did he do? He taught the people, even though he's going there, he taught the people there how to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and introduced them to chanting, congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So one can be very careful about finding some fault. Other questions?
I have a question. Hare Krishna. Damodar Pandit was the same person who was secretary of Lord Chaitanya or different?
Who was what?
Secretary of Lord Chaitanya.
No. That was Swarup Damodar. Good question. Yeah. Swarup Damodar was different. Yeah. Damodar Pandit and Swarup Damodar too. Two Damodars, you're right, but different Damodars.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Prabhu, this verse and this pastime is clearly talking about how we deal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual master, not criticizing them. But can you just say a little bit about how to deal with other devotees? I mean, we have always heard that it is an offense to criticize devotees, but criticizing devotees and other people in our lives. I know it doesn't mean if you shouldn't criticize your spiritual master that you can go around criticizing everybody else, but should we be careful?
Yes. One has to be careful about criticizing anybody, but especially criticizing devotees. There are certain people who might be in a position, there's a spiritual master or spiritual authorities that might be in a position to give guidance. That's a little bit a tricky thing. A devotee, we're hoping that we can make progress in Krishna consciousness. And part of that is realizing and appreciating that we've got a long way to go, quite a ways to go. So in that consciousness, if someone gives us guidance or instruction or correction, then if we actually have that thought, then that's an opportunity for us to make progress. That's especially a good consciousness to have. Sometimes, though, the instructions or guidance might become from a different place, not for a benevolent place, but because somebody is speaking out of material involvement, material effect. Still, one should think within oneself, what lesson can I get out of this? Is there some Krishna conscious moral or instruction to help me advance in Krishna consciousness? Because Krishna comes in all different ways. Yes, one should be very careful about criticizing others, but criticizing and instructing are not always the same. They're not the same, they're not the same. One should be very careful. That's one of the first offense in chanting the holy names, to blaspheme devotees who've dedicated their lives to propagating the holy name of the Lord. But at the same time, if one has interested in the welfare of a person, then taking them in confidence, dadati pratriginnati guyamakyati prichtiti bhunkte bojaya chaiva, is revealing one's mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially, is a help to make progress in Krishna consciousness. So if one approaches things in that way, the danger is quite much less. I don't know if that's at all helpful.
It's not easy, and we have to constantly be on guard is what you're saying, and I think that is what I'm getting. It's we have to constantly look inward.
What is our motivation?
Yes.
Yeah. What is our motivation? Yeah. And sometimes, even though we think our motivation is good, it's really not. So be ready. We have to be ready for that too. Just like when Narad Muni was being criticized by Daksha. Daksha said, it's not because I'm materially attached that I'm criticizing you. I'm of course it was, but he was saying that because he didn't understand properly. So that's why it's really important to stay in the association of devotees. Sometimes we get a little, we might not understand things correctly, but by remaining in the association of devotees and asking for help in how we can make progress in Krishna consciousness, how we can improve our service, how our service can be improved, because it's not, if we were actually on a very high platform, then we'd already be seeing Krishna face to face, but we're not there yet. So doing that is an opportunity for us to make progress.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Pancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhibhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you all. Thank you all. Oh, one thing I noticed on the newsletter that's sent out, and this is a correction, that it said that the Harrisburg Ratha Yatra starts at noon, but on their website it starts at 11. So I don't know which is correct, or maybe they're advertising 11 to start at noon. But if anybody knows, that might be important.
Parikshit Prabhu was saying that the actual parade is going to start at 12 o'clock, but before that, there's going to be some programs there.
Oh, good. What programs?
Before puja or something, I don't know, maybe some program they might be having.
Okay. All right, thank you then. So that helps. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.